Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank Irina for the invitation to come and present. I'm afraid I'm a little bit ashamed my paper only involves Oldenburg at a level of a connection with Grunwedel, but actually the whole paper is really about St. Petersburg and the activity of various scholars and academicians here. So yes, I hope you'll find it's not too disconnected. So I'm going to talk about some of the work that Albert Grunwedel published rather late in his career. His work, Alt-Kutscher, in which he copied Tibetan maps of the Kutscher and Turfan regions. I only really looked at these recently because I was in Berlin earlier this year and Karen Dreyer had done an exhibition on Grunwedel's life, which is very interesting. But one of the questions that she had was about these Tibetan maps and whether they were actually kind of fakes, as we heard in Natalie Monet's paper that Oldenburg had questioned their authenticity, and in fact Pelliot had written and said he was sure they were fakes. Although Pelliot was not a Tibetologist, so we might revisit this question. So the whole thing goes back to Grunwedel's two stays in St. Petersburg in 1902 and 1906. In 1902, as he says in Alt-Kutscher, he was given some materials, some Tibetan books, and a map of the Turfan region, which was in Turkic, transliterated into Russian. And I think Simona mentioned this, but this no longer is extant, which is the case with everything in this, all of these maps. Then he was in St. Petersburg again, Grunwedel, in 1906. And at this time he met the Buryat Mark Avan Logiev, pictured on your right. And at that time, he says, Dorjiev introduced him to some Mongolian noblemen and lamas, and they provided Grunwedel with big Tibetan maps of Kutscher and Turfan, as if by miracle, Grunwedel says, which somehow is slightly suspicious, just the sound of it. But anyway, apparently he was given these maps and he had them copied, but he didn't do anything with them until rather later. The maps, the other person that he also was connected to spend time with in St. Petersburg was Nikolai Ajori. And the maps also concern a great interest of Rorik's, which is the mythical kingdom of Shambhala. So all of this is kind of coming together in St. Petersburg. The Mongolian maps of Shambhala as Kizil and Turfan, the Rorik's interest in this mythical kingdom, and indeed Dorjiev himself is said to have written a book in which he said that the Romanov family was descendants of the kings of Shambhala. So there's a kind of growing interest in this mythical Tibetan kingdom of Shambhala. Actually, it comes from Indian sources. The actual Shambhala myth begins with the Kala Chakra Tantra, an Indian Tantra, and that actually gives indications that the location of Shambhala might be somewhere around the region of the Tarim Basin. It says Shambhala is north of India, north of the Shita River, which is generally identified with the Tarim River. And Tibetan authors, a little bit later, the Tantra, Kala Chakra Tantra itself came into being in about the 10th century, but Tibetan authors translated it and started to write commentaries on it from the 11th and 12th centuries onwards. And in the 13th century, there's a guidebook to how to get to Shambhala, written in Tibetan. And it says you leave Bhaktapur in Nepal, you travel to Khotan, then you cross the Tarim River, where you find the Uyghurs, and then north of the Tarim River, are the mountains that make up the southern boundary of Shambhala. So you can see in the original Tantric literature and in the Tibetan literature, there's good reason for thinking that this mythical kingdom might indeed be found near Kucha or Turfan. And I think Rurik must have taken some of this on, because in one of his later paintings you can see an Indian holy man meditating in a lake very near what looks like the caves of Kizil. Anyway, to return to Alt Kucha. Grünwedel previously published on Tibet, and a lot of this, again, his work was very much indebted to St. Petersburg and the Russian Orientalists. So his first book on Tibet is based, the one published in 1900 is based on the collection of Prince Ukhtomsky. Then in 1905 he published his first expedition report, and the second one in 1912 to 13. And in 1950 he published a translation of another guidebook to Shambhala by the third Panchen Lama, which was written in the 17th century. So by the time he got to writing Alt Kucha, Grünwedel was very much kind of steeped in the Tibetan writings on Shambhala, but also had done lots of his own, of course, scientific work in the regions of Kucha and Turfan and other sites in the Tarim Basin. So Alt Kucha was a kind of his way of trying to bring these all together, not, I think, entirely successfully, which has resulted in the kind of suspicion that hangs around this book. So this is the general map, Tibetan map of Kucha that he published, and the title is, in Tibetan, is Toga Ki Shambhala, Tokeri Shambhala, which is interesting in itself. We find this Tibetan name Toga used for the inhabitants of the region, which is close to various terms like Tokharai and Tokhari. It's a map I highlighted some areas in red that correspond to Kizil, Kucha, Shorchuk, I think, and another fort to the south. And you can see where these are located on the actual geography on Google Maps. So the Tibetan map is a kind of compressed version of what you see on the site. And of course, it's clear it's not really a geographical map, it's about sacred geography. So some of the sites are written in Tibetan, but even more importantly, the mystical syllables of the Kala Chakra are related to geographical sites. So you see at the top where the river flows down from the mountains, the syllables Evan, the mystical syllables, and some other syllables dotted throughout, generally vowels, E, U, I, Li. And this is a kind of a very Tibetan and Mongolian way of creating a sacred geography by mapping the tantric mandala onto the landscape. The other important map that is copied here by Grünwedel is of the Kizil cave system. So you can see I have written what he says here, a rough translation of the German, that he received this map from a Lama called Sherab Singh, who is now deceased, from a large illustrated canvas, and even nicer copies existed still in Lhasa and Tashilumpo in Tibet. And he says he's copied it here, and he's also copied the introductory text into the plan. So what you see here is Grünwedel, as he says, bringing together, put a copy of the map, and he's also shoved the text in there. So it's not exactly as the original would have looked. But what you see is a Tibetan key, so the actual caves are numbered. Not each one individually, but there's lots of little ones and lots of little twos and threes. and 4s, and the text relates to groups of caves. So the first bit of text at the top there relates to all the caves that are numbered 1. And then you go to the bit of text for 2 and 3. So it kind of groups the caves, and it also gives little squares of swastikas, which are to where you can offer incense. And Grunwald says there are so many of these, you didn't bother copying them all, because there are so many places that you can make offerings. So if we assume that Grunwald was copying from an original map, this does not represent the complete original. It's a kind of Grunwald's compressing various things into one map. And we also see here is copies of more detailed maps of the cave. Again, it's not very clear. Is he just kind of zooming into the original map and taking bits out, or were there more detailed bits in the original maps? He doesn't really say, but he does say, for example, there are details in these maps of the staircase that are no longer there, and he believes gives an idea of some of the original or earlier architectural features of the caves. So, the modern Kizil cave site. Here is Grunwald's own sketch map. This is the unpublished version. He published this in his expedition reports. And here is the site on Google Earth. So, this is north orientation. If we switch it so it's at west orientation, and then we can put the Tibetan map over the top, and it fits very nicely in. This is what you'd expect with a traditional Tibetan map. The west is up, the east is at the bottom. And this is always the way that, for instance, Tantric mandalas are shown with the east gate at the bottom, based on, I think, conventional Indian conventions, where that's the sort of the orientation of maps. So that's what we'd expect. And here I give a rough translation of the first bit of text. So this is about, the bit of text relates to all of the caves that are numbered 1 in the map, and it tells a story about what happened with these caves. And it's about a Bulgarian king that's given 3 names, Mendre, Polosi, and Anandavarna, and about the painters that he invited to restore the caves, not to construct them, not to paint them, but restore is actually the word used. And they're from various places. The room of Karma, which is mentioned, here is, according to Grunwald, Syria. But actually, I'm not sure how he makes that equivalence. And then it also talks about this area was invaded by the king of the Gyase. So who are the Gyase? Actually, since the 19th century, it means the Russians. But I found that earlier on, the Gyase were the kind of tribes that were referred to as the tribes that were conquered by Genghis Khan. So maybe the Kharahitans or something. And they came and they invaded, and King Mendre was killed. In a very Buddhist way, his body was taken by Amitabha, but it just means he was killed by the invaders. And then later on, the son of this king came, and all of the Buddhists in the cave, by following the Kalachakra Tantra, managed to slay the invaders and restore the caves. So it's a kind of myth about the way the tantric, the power of the tantra managed to keep these caves for the Buddhists and to keep them restored and functioning as Buddhist caves. And the other bits of text give similar kinds of stories. Now, in Alt-Kucha, Grunwald was concerned to try and link these texts to things in the caves themselves, and I think in this he was really probably not very successful. But one inscription that he gives the name of King Anantavarma Kucha Maharaja, the great king of Kucha, Anantavarma, which matches with one of the names of the king given in the Tibetan. So, if this inscription is really there, then that would give some kind of credence to the account, but I'm not sure whether the inscriptions have actually been recorded or not by other people. So the last map I want to show is supposed to be a map of Kocha, Galchang, and it also has a Tibetan title, which I translate as a plan of Shambhala of the great Idikut king, with temples of the Manichaeans, Christians, and Buddhists. So it's one of the names given to Kocha is Idikut Shari, and I think this, based on the titles taken by some of the Uyghur kings of the region. The Tibetan actually Idukut, so it's slightly different, but I think we can assume this is Idikut. And then the map gives various places. It says, for instance, a big one on the left is the palace of the king, with a Manichaean temple, number 10 at the bottom there, and then underneath that it says there's some graves of Christians near the Manichaean temple. So it's very detailed. Whether we can relate it to the actual site is another question. This is Stein's map of Kocha or Harahoja or Idikut Shari. If we flip this to face up to the west again, and compare it with the map, the Tibetan map now superimposed on the site of Google Earth, it's not so easy as with the Kucha map, but possibly we can link the big structure there with the big structure of the Tibetan map, which is supposed to be the palace of the king, and some of the other structures might also be linked with the Tibetan map, but this is definitely a matter for further research. And Grunwedel, although he published this map and then went on to discuss the site, doesn't really come to any satisfactory conclusions about the correspondence. Mainly he complains about how much devastation happened at the site, even in between his two visits to Kocha. But, I mean, in theory, there should be, the original plan could be found because it's supposed to have come from the collection of Albert Regel, who was the first visitor to Kocha and was resident here in St. Petersburg. He was a botanist. And this was apparently in his own personal collection, so in theory, it could still be around. So, to conclude about the question of whether the Grunwedel maps in Alt Kucha were not authentic or, as Pelias said, just fakes, I don't think it was in the scope of Grunwedel himself simply to make all of this up. There's too many connections to other historical and mythological texts in Tibetan culture, which I'm not sure Grunwedel was aware of. And in any case, you can see from his translations of the text that he was struggling with them, and his translations are not very good, in fact, from a modern point of view. So it certainly seems to me that the maps themselves are some kind of genuine production of Tibeto-Mongolian culture. Of course, the question remains how old they are. It could be that they go all the way back to the Uyghur, Mongol, Tibetan period when the manuscripts, like this one from Harahoja, were written up to the 13th, early 14th century. It could be they're as old as that originally, or it could be that they were written down and the ink was barely dry by the time they were shown to Grunwedel. But on the other hand, that would suggest that Dorjieff and other monks were perpetuating a kind of a trick on Grunwedel, which is possible, but in any case, even if they were, they would have to have been drawing on much earlier mythological material. And I think what I find fascinating about the maps is that they show us the Kucha site, and Kizil and Harahoja as living sacred sites. In the imagination of the Buryats, some of the Mongols and maybe Tibetans, these continue to be part of a sacred geography where you could come on pilgrimages and make offerings and They certainly weren't just repositories of ancient manuscripts and art that we tend to see them as. So this is just a kind of preliminary report on this stuff. I'd certainly like to talk more to some people here and others who know more about it than I do, but I think there's a lot more interesting work to be done on it. So thanks very much.
Thanks a lot. Some questions?
Concerning Kikuchapi, there's a sketch by Grünwedel himself, a real sketch, when he visited first in 1902 in his report on Idikuchapi. So did you compare it with this map? Because you showed the style map. So it would be better to compare it with the Grünwedel's map.
Yeah, I did compare that as well, but actually I found it quite difficult to read Grünwedel's map. I can do it small because he uses little Greek signs, doesn't he? And then, like he says, really it was just for his own reference, the map. But it should be compared more closely. But I mean, one of the reasons to think that the Tibetan map is not just something that Grünwedel faked up himself is that it's really not very similar to his own sketch map of Vidikucha.
The other point is that 2 years ago in Berlin there was published a new book about Grünwedel. And in that book there's an article which takes it as a serious source.
Okay.
And the author says that finally it was found the source, how the painter and how the kings, their names and so on.
Okay.
Did you see?
No, I didn't. No. So he said, does he give the sources, the author?
He relies on the Grünwedel's pronunciations.
Yes. Okay. It'd be interesting to see if he has some serious sources for the material. Can I get the reference from him?
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Simone has it. Let us